Was a Final Four for the ages. Each team that competed had the look of a champion, but the Florida Gators will head into next season as title defenders. And for a discussion on what the forecast for next year looks like for each of these teams, we're bringing in Eric Bossi and Travis Branham. All right, fellas, welcome to the show. Now, Ebos, you have been writing the Stay, Go, Hello features over on 24/7 Sports. Trav, of course, is the czar of the transfer portal. Put it together, and we're already talking about next season. Let's begin with the now national champions, Florida Gators. Trav, I will start with you. As we look at this roster and what they may need to prioritize in the offseason that began about 12 hours ago, what does Todd Golden need to focus on in the immediate future?
Yeah, the priority here is clear. They're losing the most outstanding player of the NCAA tournament in Walter Clayton Jr., but also losing Will Richard and Elijah Martin. So replacing those three guys, especially at this point in the transfer portal, it's dang near impossible unless there's some late surprise entries. We are expecting a couple more to continue going in, but at this point, who's out there or who has already hit has already committed. And those were guys like Silas Demery that I think Florida would have loved to have gotten involved with. However, they were focused on making this national championship run. So these kids have already committed. Now I do anticipate they'll probably get involved with a guard like Xavier Lee. That is one guard that they have been linked with. So trying to get involved with some of these guys. I do have Denzel Aberdeen coming back. I would anticipate he's going to be required to take a big step forward next season. They also have two high school commits coming in Alex Lloyd, a four-star Florida native, and also CJ Ingram, a guy that I think in time could be an Elijah Martin replacement. Now, again, Elijah Martin had already been to a Final Four. It was very experienced, but like Elijah, CJ is a very aggressive, high motor, athletic wing that is improving as a shooter. So going to be a lockdown defender.
Bossi, one of the things that Todd Golden has talked about in the past is that playing with two bigs from a roster construction standpoint gives his team a high floor and protects them against years where they may not have the same ceiling. I think the guard play, specifically Walter Clayton Jr., was really what gave them the ceiling this year, but they are going to be bringing back a really high floor front court. Talk to us about who Todd Golden will return next year and what it could mean for the way they play.
Assuming they get everyone back, they could have the most loaded front court in the country when you're talking about Alex Condon, Thomas Hawk, and Ruben Chinyelu. But I would expect that both Condon and now Hoff, after that incredible NCAA tournament run, are going to submit their names to the NBA draft. So they're going to have to really watch and see what happens with those guys and be prepared to be really nimble and make moves in the transfer portal if necessary, because you can't be left without both of those guys. Now, I think both of them are kind of borderline first-round talents. Hoff with maybe a little bit more rising stock right now. So I think he might be the more likely of him and Condon to stay in the draft. But as things stand, I think they both might be a little bit too borderline between the first and second round. And with the influx of NIL cash that Florida will surely have after a national championship, I think they can keep those guys happy. So you're looking at what I think most people will call the best front court in the country heading into next season. That's, again, assuming everyone's back.
Again, following that Mark Few model that Todd Golden talked to us about right here on the 24/7 Sports College Basketball Show when we interviewed him last month. Boss, I want to ask you about the Houston Cougars. Obviously, just extreme heartbreak. We know they have the best high school recruiting class that we have seen under Kelvin Sampson. They've got three guys in the top 30 prospects in America. I'm curious, though, what else do they need to do this offseason to give them a chance to get to Indianapolis next season?
It's going to start with their backcourt. They've got to find another guard to help replace LJ Cryer. And they may need two if Milo Suzon ends up going to the NBA, which is a distinct possibility right now. Now, I think Uzon not having a great Final Four may tend to lead him back to school a little bit, but we'll have to see on that. But, they've got Kingston Flemings coming in. He's a top 25 point guard, top 25 player in the class of 2025. But asking him to come in and give the type of minutes that they got out of LJ Cryer is going to be a big ask for a guy who's still got to develop physically. So they really need to go find a polished guard, a guy that can play some at the point, some that can play at the two, and knock down some shots for them to kind of ease the pressure of those freshmen they got coming in. Because, like you said, it is certainly a talented freshman class. Chris Sinak Jr. figures to be the replacement for Juwan Roberts, a program legend now. But again, he's going to need some help on that front line with Javier Francis going and potentially Joseph Tugler going to the NBA. So it's really interesting. So many of these schools, what happens over this next month is entirely dependent upon not only NBA decisions, but does anyone leave for the transfer portal? You know, it used to be you won a national championship or you made a national championship game. Everyone who was available to come back came back, and you tried to run it up again. But it's a new time, and we're going to have to see what happens with their roster over the next couple of weeks.
All right, Trav, let's talk about Duke, because obviously a lot of people are talking about the Blue Devils and where they go from here. We saw them rebuild almost their entire roster going into this season, with the exception of Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster. What are expectations about what the 2025-26 version of the Blue Devils might look like?
Yeah, they're obviously going to be losing 3 core and star players out of this year's team. I mean, assuming that Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, and Kaman Malawach are all entering the draft. They're all 3 projected as top 10 picks. And when you have that type of projection, you don't come back to college. But they do have the #1 recruiting class once again in with guys. Their recruiting class is headlined by the Boozer twins, of course, Cameron and Caden Boozer, who are 2 of the winningest players ever in high school basketball. But I don't think Cameron Boozer can necessarily fill the shoes that a Cooper Flagg had this season. Now, he is going to be an instant impact guy, a guy that can get a double-double on any given night. But looking back at this roster, although you're losing those 3 star players and Sion James, John Shire is going to have a bit of a luxury on his hands. He hasn't had this many possible returners coming back to his roster since he's been the head coach. And I think you're looking at guys like Caleb Foster and Isaiah Evans. Isaiah Evans could test the waters, but I think he has a lot more to gain by coming back. And then you're going to be getting back guys like Malik Brown, who's a crucial piece to this team this season, as well as Pat Gongba, who really came into his own during the second half of the season and showed that he's going to be a real player for this Duke basketball program. So now, with all those guys coming in, also including that 2025 recruiting class, you have Nick Amenya, and they're still in the race with Nate Ament. And I think there's a good chance that they could end up getting him at the end of the day. So there's a ton of talent on this roster, but I do think you're going to need a couple more vets to make this Final Four run again, potentially another strong, athletic, 2-way guard on the perimeter that can really score and also carry a load on the defensive end of the floor, and then maybe add some rim protection into there. But looking at this Duke roster, there's still an immense amount of talent coming in next season to make this run.
Trav, other than Caden Boozer, do we have a sense of like who else could be in the point guard rotation there? Are they going to have to go get somebody out of the portal, or is this something that they feel like they can handle internally?
I mean, don't forget about Caleb Foster. I know the first 2 seasons have not necessarily gone according to plan for Foster, but if you watched his progression over the course of this season, he really started coming back into his own. And we've all watched Caleb for a very long time, and having watched him from the time he's a freshman in high school, when he really emerged as that early 5-star recruit, that kid was as mature of a decision maker and point guard as there was at the time in his recruiting class. Then he ended up evolving his game and becoming more of a score-first mindset player, and that's more what we saw at Duke for the first year and a half. But this last month and a half, Caleb was great with the ball in his hands. He got downhill, got into the paint, as we saw at the Final Four, was great defensively, attacked the glass, and he showed a lot of really good things. So I think with that progression he is now on, I think he could be taking a step up and really taking over the reins as the point guard for that team next season.
All right, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Caleb Foster. I know a lot of people interested to see if he heads back, if he explores the portal. Going to be an interesting subplot to watch. Bossi, I want to ask you about Auburn, because the talking point all season long has been how they're going to lose almost their complete roster given the amount of seniors and fifth-year players they have. Bruce Pearl has said recently, though, that Chad Baker-Mazara could technically return. He and I graduated high school in the same year, so that's pretty incredible. But what else could Auburn's roster look like next year as they attempt to get to the Final Four in Indianapolis?
There's no doubt that of any of these teams that have made the Final Four, they've got the most questions to answer with their roster construction. I think this thing was built with one thing definitely in mind, and that was having Tahad Pettiford as their point guard next season. Now, Tahad has announced that he's going to enter the draft while retaining his college eligibility. I would bet there's a really strong chance he ends up staying in the draft. Talking to some NBA guys during the Final Four, it seems like he's put himself into pretty good contention to be a first-round pick, and certainly if he can get that promise, he's out of there. And even whether or not he stays or goes, they have got to find another ball handler to bring back with them. They've talked about potentially putting Chad Baker-Mazara at the point some, but Baker-Mazara is also going to explore the NBA. The guy is 25 years old, and in a league that drafts on youth, potentially trying to enter the draft a year from now as a 26-year-old could be a daunting possibility. But also, the NIL money is going to be there to keep him happy. The other big thing is figuring out a way to replace Chani Broome. They don't really have a big man lined up right now. Flory Badunga from Kansas had hit the portal, and there was a lot of speculation that he was going to be the guy for Auburn. Obviously, they missed out on him with him returning to Kansas, so it leaves a lot of questions. You know, they've got a good recruiting class. They've got some good guys coming in. Really like Sebastian Williams-Adams. He's a fit for them. Keyshawn Hall from UCF is a transfer who I think is going to make a tremendous splash for them when he gets there. The big guard is a scorer, so they've got some guys. Caden Magwood can help out with the point. He's an electric point guard, kind of like Tahad Pettiford. But they've got more questions and a lot of work to do in the transfer portal here in the next couple of weeks.
All right, work to be done for Bruce Pearl. Don't go anywhere. Bossi and Travis aren't. They will be back with us. But coming up next, prospects are flying.